Amen. Good morning, church. We welcome our visitors, our guests that are here with us today, and I see some faces I haven't seen in a few weeks, and others I have not seen yet. You might have been here before, but I might have missed you, or I was not here that time you were here. But it's great to have each and every one of you here this Lord's Day to worship our Father in heaven and to encourage one another, to lift one another. You know, those are the reasons why we're here. We're here to stir each other into love and good works, to encourage one another, and also to honor God, to worship Him. And the Bible tells us to do so in spirit and in truth. You know, if we think about it, going through the whole Bible and reading from Genesis all the way to Revelation. Now, you think about we could think like that's a daunting task, right? If we think about it, if we're going to do it in a short period of time. Like someone said, I want you to read the Bible in 3 days. You know, really? How am I going to sleep? You know, but when we take it little by little, you know, when we take it just 30 minutes a day, 20, 30 minutes a day, we read as much as we can. We're consistent in that. We're gonna accomplish that task. You know, it's been over a year, I think, but I kind of threw it out there. Let's write out the New Testament and not just read it, but write it out. And I know Megan, she not only read it, but Megan went through and Megan had wrote the whole New Testament. She got a bunch of journals and she went and she accomplished it. And see, I'm the one that threw it out there. Then I'm the one that quit. You know, I quit because, you know, big excuse. You know, my arms hurt too much. Yeah, I've got the carpal tunnel. You know, I did have pain while I was doing it, but I should have just kept doing it. Even if it's going to take 2 years, you know, just keep doing it, right? A little bit out at a time. That's how, if you'd ask her, how'd you accomplish that? She would just tell you, you know what, every day I just went and went from Matthew and started writing until she was at the end of Revelation. And so we think about tasks, we think about big things at times, and we get intimidated. You know, Tommy and Jake are starting a new Bible study at Megan and Jake's house, and Tommy says, we're going to go through every single Bible. And I said, man, that is awesome. But if we think about that also, it's like we just talked about reading. You know, you know, that is daunting, to go through every single Bible and do a Bible study. But just like that, just like reading it, you just do it a little bit at a time. And it doesn't matter. You know, like he says, it doesn't matter if it takes 5 years. You know, let's do this. And there's power in the little. You know, there's power because it ends up being something so big. So imagine if we apply that principle to our lives every day. Especially we apply that to our spiritual growth. Work on those little things faithfully every day, and we are going to grow tremendously in the faith. It's going to strengthen us so much. I ask, are you in or are you out? Let's do this together. Every single day, let's just work on those little things to strengthen us. Strengthen us as people, but especially strengthen all of us in our faith. Are we being faithful in the little things? Or do we see those things that do not matter? You know, Tracy and I have committed ourselves to waking up every morning, actually 4 days a week. We're not going to do it 5, but we do it 4 days a week. We wake up early, 4:30 in the morning. We get into our Bible study, and then we listen to a personal growth. Right now we're listening to Darren Hardy. He used to be the editor of Success Magazine. We listen to his Darren Daily, and it's just it just gets you going for your day. And then we go in and we do an exercise. So we do these 3 things, and when you do these things every day, I mean, the rest of your day is just like, let's go. It's just so awesome. And we've made that commitment to improve ourselves personally and financially, and then also, of course, more importantly, spiritually. And we remind each other, you know, we hold each other accountable each day. If one's too tired, we say, no, it's time. Get up. Let's do this. Just a little bit at a time, and we're going to accomplish our goals. So big dreams, big goals are wonderful to have, aren't they? We set those things, and we have these dreams, and And we must have those that big why in our lives. Why are we here? Why do we do as we do? Why are we Christians? Why do we want to follow God? Ours in the faith should be serving and pleasing God, that big why. But we don't have to start always at that big thing, that big why. We could do the little things that bring us up to the big why. See, we often concentrate and we put more importance on the big things in life. But no matter what we do, especially in our walk with Jesus, we must never ignore the little things. Because often it's the little things we ignore result in the big things that we long for. See, Jesus stated in Luke chapter 16, verse 10, he says, "He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. And he who is unrighteous in very little thing is unrighteous also in much." And we can see that's habit forming, right? When we do something over and over, if we're faithful in just a little thing, we're going to develop that habit, and we're going to be faithful in much. But also negatively, we look at the other way, and if we do it unfaithfully, just in a little bit of things we're unfaithful, oh, that's no big deal. We're going to end up being unfaithful in much, in a lot. Today we're going to focus our minds on the power and the importance of little things. See, we should never demean and we should never despise or never belittle the little. Never belittle those little things, because God uses small instrumentalities to accomplish big realities. And let's remember that. We can see this principle accomplished by God through Zechariah. So if you have your Bibles with you, turn to Zechariah chapter 4. In Zechariah chapter 4 and verse 10, where God says, "For who has despised the day of small things? But these 7 will be glad when they see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. These are the eyes of the Lord, which range to and fro throughout the earth." Here we see it's around 537 BC, and the temple has been destroyed. So in the temple and the land there were all in ruins. And God's people had been in exile. They've been in captivity. And God calls Zerubbabel to take a righteous remnant. He says, take these people and to go back to Jerusalem and to rebuild the temple. He gives them actually 3 tasks that we're going to look at. And you think about Zerubbabel could be looking at these 3 tasks and think, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? This is too hard. This is too big. First of all, task number 1 is to rebuild the nation. See, he was to bring God's righteous remnant back to Jerusalem. And you think about where were they at this time? They were poor and they were struggling and they were surrounded by their enemies. And in this, the task number 2, to rekindle their faith after being in captivity. See, they lost their place of worship. They lost their home. They were living in a foreign land with no temple to worship God. And it brings us to task number 3. He was to reestablish that temple. You could think, excuse me, Lord? How am I going to do this? I mean, we're a small group. We are poor, and we have no food. We have no materials to use. We have nothing to work with. But looking at it on the surface, that could be very intimidating, these huge tasks that he's looking at. It's like reading the Bible in 3 days. You know, sometimes we believe that something is just too big to accomplish. It's too difficult a task. So why are we going to bother? See, we desire the big things, but when we realize that what it takes to accomplish those big things, then we cower or we quit, we turn away. But notice what God states to Zerubbabel, and this will be accomplished. He says this is going to be accomplished, not by force. It's not going to happen in a day. Look at verses 6 and 7 of our text. It says, "Then he said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, not by power, or might nor power, but by what?" He says, but my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. What are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will become a plain, and he will bring forth the top stone with shouts of grace. Grace to it. See, God is basically telling him that he needs to just go one stone at a time. And he also says, you're not going to do this by your might, by your power. See, your strength is insignificant. Not his faith, his strength. He says, I have the power. See, God tells him here that it is by his Spirit. See, the power of God makes the impossible possible, the impossible possible. Remember what Jesus stated about the mustard seed. If you look up on that screen, and this mustard seed, this tiny little seed, and then it grows into a big, large tree. See, he tells him to have a faith of a mustard seed. Just a little bit of faith on our part is going to accomplish great things. See, and it says, God will move mountains. God's going to move the mountains of sin out of our lives. God's going to move the mountains of difficulty we face. But we're going to have to face them, and we're going to have to go through them first. But have that little faith. God is going to get us through if we trust in him. See, here Zerubbabel is to rebuild the temple. But he's going to have help. He's going to have a small, righteous remnant of people, but he's also going to have God's help. But he was to do what? He was to grab that first stone. Put that first stone in place. Lift what he can. One stone at a time. See, God's the one who does the heavy lifting. At times we try to do the real heavy lifting. We try to put too much on our shoulders, don't we? I know I do. But he says, grab that stone, then grab another. Work together, accomplish what I asked you to do. See, when the temple was being built, the people were grumbling that it wouldn't be as great as Solomon's temple, and they feared that it's going to be insignificant. But God said that when that last stone was put there by Zerubbabel, they would say grace. Grace to it. See, they would celebrate with great joy. Ezra chapter 6, verse 16. To build, we must do the little things. We must just jump in and we must grab that stone and build together. See, if you see up on the screen, there is a work day here. We're down here doing work, and there is men, Tom and other men doing the grounds, and Tom has a project to remove all these stones from one area, and he laid out the tarp and to put those stones from that area to that area so we could wash the stones, and then Megan's going to go through and she's going to paint them for a project. The congregation, the elders, and they all decided what for the kids, what they're going to do for them. And so they put those stones there, and it's just one stone at a time. I mean, when you first look at it, and you're grabbing these stones and you're putting them in the buckets, or you're putting them in the wheelbarrow, and you think you've done a lot, and you look over and it's like, man, I didn't even make a dent. Terrence was there doing it, and Lucy and Tracy and myself, and then look at that little guy, that little Christopher. Even he was grabbing one stone at a time. And then we have Chuck and Carrie. Chuck and Carrie were working on the patio for the fire pit, and they're doing a wonderful job there. One stone at a time, grabbing that one stone. Chuck getting it all level. Jack's also worked on that. There's so many people working and doing stuff around the building. I could name so many that are basically grabbing one stone at a time to make this property beautiful. We think about our faith of a mustard seed. If we want to have more faith, if we want to be more strong in the faith, if we want to build that faith, we got to be like a David. We got to be like a Daniel. Do it as what they did. Embrace the little things. Work on the basics. Serve how you can. Pray, teach, love others, have mercy, be positive, smile, send little cards. When you make a mistake, learn from that mistake and grow. I mean, there are so many little things that we could all think about that we could just apply every day of our lives, especially in our faith. I mean, if you look at David, before David faced Goliath, before he faced that giant in his life that stood before him, I mean, the odds were against him. Before that, before he became a great king of Israel, he was just a little shepherd boy, watching over the flock, feeding the sheep, protecting them. He did this day in and day out. He labored for God. He built up his strength. He faced wild animals. So when he went up and when he faced the giant, when he faced Goliath, see, his faith was built up. It was strong. It was the little things he went through and did first. These things led him to be the man after God's own heart. Led him to be one, if not the greatest king of Israel. And then we look at Daniel. We want to have the faith of Daniel, to stand in that lion's den and to face those vicious lions that wanted to eat him, right? We want to walk in our Christian lives and have that type of faith to face the wild animals out there. But if we look at Daniel, what did Daniel do? For 3 times a day, every day, Daniel went to his knees in faithful prayer to God. Imagine being that faithful. Are you that faithful? This is what we need to do, to be faithful in the little things, because the little things we ignore result in the big things we long for. The little things turn into great things. Legendary basketball coach of the NCAA, he is the coach of UCLA, John Wooden. They called him the Wizard of Westwood. And he would teach his athletes to sit down and to put on their socks, put on their shoes, tie their shoes. And you think, well, do that anyways. That's such a simple, mundane thing. What's that going to accomplish? But see, he was teaching them to develop habits. That's not all he did, of course. But he was teaching them to pay attention to the very small details. They do that, and they're going to do that in being athletes and being basketball players. See, Wooden stated this. He stated, it's the little things that are vital. Little things make big things happen. Think he knew what he was talking about? See, he used godly principles. And Wooden won 10 out of 12 years. Those 10 years out of 12, he won the national championship. A record 7 years in a row, he brought home the title. That is an amazing feat, isn't it? But he had his players concentrate on the basics, the little things that mattered, that brought him to the big championships. See, God will take the little things we do, and He's going to turn those little things into big things. But there can be a negative outcome to the little things if we do not pay attention, if we are not aware. I don't know if you know of author Andy Andrews. He's one of my favorite authors. If you haven't read any of his books, I really highly recommend you reading any one of his books. Just buy a book or get at the library if you can find it there and just read it, because it will lift you up. You won't want to put it down. Well, in his book, The Traveler's Gift, he tells a story. He went fishing with some of his friends off the Orange Beach coast in Alabama. They wanted to just do it, so they rented a boat. They didn't get a guide, and his friend, they filled up the boat with gas, and his friend said, "Hey, I know of a good spot. Let's go out to that oil rig." And so they put in the coordinates, and they put in the coordinates into the boat, and they set out to go fishing. And as they drove out to the ocean, they kept going, but no oil rig. So they kept going. Instead of turning back, we're gonna eventually run into it. And then they ran out of gas. And they ran out of gas, they started to what? They started to drift off. Yeah, that strong ocean current started taking them and drift them away. And fortunately, they weren't found. And luckily, they were found, because this has happened to people with tragic ending. But they are found 36 hours later by the Coast Guard. And they asked the boat owner, he says, what happened? We put in the coordinates. I don't understand why we couldn't find it. And so he looked at it, and he realized that they were just 2 degrees off. 2 degrees out of 360 degrees. See, that's 1/16 of an inch on a compass. It's nothing, right? It's just a little bit off. But the difference makes a huge difference. The further you go being just a little bit off out there, the further you drift away from your destination. See, how many have been drifting away from heaven each day? See, many do, and they don't even realize it. See, we must pay attention to the little things so we do not drift away. Notice some great things that came from little things. Jesus fed 5,000. We know he did 4,000, he did 5,000, just with a little bit of bread and fish. Samson slew an entire army just with a little jawbone. David, like we talked about, took down the giant Goliath, with just a little tiny stone. And then a little tiny mustard seed grows into being a big, big tree. You know, in the business world, was once little, is now giant. These companies, Google, we all know Google. We all know the 3 of these companies. Google was founded in a garage in 1998 by Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Both of them are worth $52 billion. One's a little bit more. And it's the most visited search engine in the world. Then we look at Apple. Steve Jobs founded Apple in '76, also in the garage of his childhood home on Chris Drive in Los Altos, California. It's the first company to be worth $1 trillion. See, that is 1% of the world's GDP, the gross domestic product. That is 5% of America's. That figure is just, I can't even fathom that figure. But it started in a garage. It started very, very, very little. Amazon, founded in 1995 by Jeff Bezos in the garage of his home. Have something in common here? All in their garage. And all grew to be just these mega corporations. Amazon also has reached a $1 trillion mark. They started, 3 companies started with a vision, started with a dream, little bit of income in the garage of their homes, and now they're the top producing giants in the business world. The power of little, it started somewhere. We do not believe being little can be something very huge, something very great, then we have not been paying attention into the business world, and especially in the Bible, because God does that, doesn't He? God takes those little things and He brings out great things from them. But what about our thoughts? Our thoughts start little, right? We could say we have a little thought. But what happens to that little thought? It grows. It becomes physical. Because when we think of something, if we do it enough, it becomes a habit. And then repetition becomes reality. What goes through our minds, and think about what we think about on a daily basis. See, if we think we are too little to accomplish great things, we are right. If we think we could do great things, we are right? Henry Ford stated that. He said, whether you think you can or think you cannot, he said, you are right. He most likely got that idea from the wise man in the Bible. From Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7 states, for as he thinks within himself, so he is. Yeah, little thoughts are not little. Little thoughts are powerful. It could cause us to do great things, be very faithful, or it could cause us to go the other way. It could cause us to ruin ourselves. Thoughts go to our tongues. Yeah, what about our tongues? Well, we know about the tongue. We've all have used our tongue in the wrong way. We look at the book of James and we see James chapter 3, and he tells us that the tongue is a fire. See, the tongue is just a small instrument of the body, but the tongue can do massive damage. Massive damage to someone else. It can ruin their reputation. It could cause someone to hurt themselves. They think very little of themselves, that they just say, it's no longer worth living this life. See, the tongue is a weapon. He used those illustrations there in the book of James. That just a little bit in the horse's mouth controls the whole horse. A little rudder on a ship can control that whole ship. It navigates that whole ship in the ocean with how the ocean is in the current. But that little rudder puts it on its way, right? A little spark causes an enormous forest fire. So how do we handle our tongue? How do we handle gossip? Right? Gossip's no big deal, is it? Yeah, gossip is a very, very big deal. See, the devil will use these types of things, and he'll use gossip in our lives, and it's going to eventually steal our souls. See, gossip is more toxic than any snake venom. Any venom. Any poisonous snake. Yeah, that may kill you physically. But gossip is going to eventually kill you spiritually. You're going to lose your soul if you are one to gossip. See, it ruins a good name. It ruins a good reputation. Not only the person you're ruining, it ruins your own. A good name is favored more than great wealth. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1. See, and we bear false witness and we gossip. We destroy lives. A little negative influence comes from the heart. Comes right from the heart. And that comes right from our tongue. From the heart to the tongue out there, and it destroys. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6, he says, a little leaven leavens the whole lump of dough. In the Old Testament, when the Passover was to come, the Jews were to cleanse their homes of any bad leaven. Not even a little smudge could be in their homes. Does God want us to have any of that bad leaven in our lives? Just a word, just a curse word. I'm just doing a little sin. No, God wants us to purge that from our lives. Get it out of our lives. See, what we think goes to what we say, and eventually it goes to what we do. We have to watch our actions. There's a story about a minister in Texas in the late 1800s. His name is Robert James, and he had two sons, and he was a minister, and he was always busy, and he felt bad. He wanted his sons to be occupied by something. He wanted them so badly to have a dog. And one day a stray dog comes up to him. This black dog. This black dog had 3 white hairs on its tail. All black, but 3 white hairs. And it comes up to him, and it's a stray dog. Hey, I'm going to take this dog home to my sons. He takes the dog home to his sons. His sons are really excited, really happy. They're playing with the dog. And then the owner of the dog gets the word out there. And he goes door to door looking for his dog. So he got an idea. He's going to be coming to my house. And I don't want my sons to lose that dog. You know, they're so happy with him, and they're preoccupied always. So he paints the dog's tail. See, I think that movie, Meet the Parents, I think they got it from this story. And that movie, I don't know if you've seen it, but he paints the cat's tail to make it look like that's the cat he lost. You know, so he paints the dog's tail, and the guy gets to his house, and the dog runs up to the door, and he opens the door, and he goes, "That's my dog." He goes, "It looks just like my dog." and he has papers in his hand. And he goes, well, can I see those papers? So he hands him the papers, and he reads them, and he says, but your dog had 3 white hairs on the tail. See, and why he was doing this, he was masterfully manipulating the whole situation. You know, he knew he lied. He knew he did that. His boys are watching him. They're watching him do this. And so the owner says, yeah, you're right. And the owner leaves, and he gets to keep the dog for his sons. Well, the minister had told the story, we kept the dog, but lost the boys. See, his boys' names were Frank and Jesse James. The notorious outlaws who robbed banks. This is a picture of them when they were very young, a rare picture. And they went out and they cheated and they swindled and I'm sure they murdered people. Look at that example, that bad example of a minister also. See, ministers could do wrong. I've done plenty of wrong. But we got to be good influences, and we got to, the example, and it's the little things. See, that's just a little thing. Just paint that little tail and keep the dog. He'll find another one. You know, we think that way sometimes. Isn't this a tragic story? Those boys' souls were lost because they watched their dad do the wrong thing. All because he wanted them to have the dogs. Sad. How are we looking at the little things? Are we looking at them as no big deal and ignoring them? We're going to stop there. I do have a second part again today. And it's basically like an application. I have 2 examples I want to talk about tonight. I think you'll enjoy it. Hopefully I present it to you in a way that you will. And it'll all come together. Little things are powerful. If we just move forward in faith and trust in God as we go through and master those little things and work those little things, we're going to accomplish great things. Because God uses small instrumentalities to accomplish big realities, and we are in His reality. We are the reality of the church. We are the church. And so God uses us. Every single one of us here, He's going to use you. Let's remember, little things are powerful. They create big, big things. The lesson is yours this morning. If you have been concentrating on things you're not supposed to, if you've ignored the little things in your life, the little things that are going to strengthen your faith, to get you to walk with Jesus, to please Jesus, you could stop that today. It doesn't have to keep going. You could look to God. Follow these basics in your life. Build them up to be a mature Christian, to do God's will. And if you need prayer, whatever you need, we could baptize you today. We could pray with you today. Come as we sing the invitation song.